Welcome to F.A.C.E, Ali.
Okay.
Howdy.
Are you going to be sharing the screen at all, or
yeah,
we're just?
let me. I'm not a big Zoom guy.
It's that green box. Share screen.
Yeah, stop your. You can't start your video because the host has stopped it. That's what it says.
Okay, you don't want to start your video. You want to share the screen. It's a green box.
If you want to open your
right.
camera as well, I can make that happen. Okay, there it is. If you want to switch on your camera, I just enable.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, Ali. And to share the screen, it's a green box. Oh, you just want to do this. Okay.
Yeah. Right, Ali. It wasn't giving me the option.
Okay. Well, you know, thank you so much. You told me you only had 2 hours sleep last night because of the breaking news of what's happening to the president and the first lady. Before we get going, I just want to read what you sent me about you so people could understand. And I appreciate your transparency about, you know, what side of this election you're on. Ali Alexander is a 13-year veteran of professional politics and electioneering at the national level. He's a pragmatic conservative Republican aligned with the Trump administration. He's also an activist and does some of his public-facing work at founders.alialexander.org, where he delivers exclusive reports and analysis for some of his members, creating a hybrid model for those who can't afford or don't need lobbyists but can benefit from the work of having the inside track. So nice to meet you. And you know what we're going to prove today, Ali? That
what are we going to prove?
People could be on different sides and have different opinions and be maybe, you know, I really never classified myself as either, pretty much independent. I don't think government should legislate morality. So, you know, to me, that is, you know, kind of libertarian part of me. And you know what, before we get going, I'd like to ask you, how did you get involved in it? Was there some major political issue? Or was it a lot of people end up having the same beliefs as their family? So tell us a little bit about that before we get going into your work.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Dale.
Welcome,
my friend Ed is a huge fan and said, hey, you got to go on this. And so I said, okay, let's do it. And so it was a lot of fun. My mom's a lawyer. I grew up phone banking for judges and, sometimes door knocking for local politicians, but I think I always knew I was going to end up in politics, but I did get here kind of unconventionally. I dropped out of college twice and then decided to start my business inside of politics and accidentally blew up. I think the man met the moment and I survived the moment. And, kind of the rest has been history. But my mom's politics and mine aren't exactly the same, especially when it comes to this administration. And
it's gonna be fun. Can you guys still have Thanksgiving and Christmas together?
Yeah, as long as we keep some topics off the off the table. This is the first time in my career where we've had to say, hey, there's some things that we just can't discuss. And but
it's the first time in a lot of people's lives, Ali. I mean, I can never remember a time period. I'm at least a year older than you, where we've had to not talk about politics or religion or anything without people getting upset enough to leave. And I mean, it's gotten to the point where I saw a tweet where someone was saying to his dad, it's either Trump or your grandchildren and me. Yeah. And to me, that is so terrible. Okay. Yeah. So, all right. So major breaking news. And I haven't been watching the news. In fact, Ali, overslept today and I had cobwebs at the opening of our show today. Why don't you get me up to speed about how this recent development is going to play into this next 4 to 5 weeks?
Well, I think it's going to be pretty interesting. A lot of Trump supporters were pretty down and out, not just because, this is a health scare, but because this may take away from a week or two of the president campaigning and doing his kind of now iconic outdoor rallies with tens of thousands of people or so. And so I think that there's a lot of, somber attitude on the right. I think that the left is you've got professional people who are keeping it professional. And then, you've got some of the feral people in the grassroots of the Democrat Party who are wishing death threats and death wishes to the First Lady and the president. But, that kind of
you know what, you're right. You know what, how I know you're right? I know
Did you read
some
the replies?
people. No, because I know people during this whole COVID, pandemic that have said something. Well, wouldn't it be something if President Trump got COVID?
Yeah.
Almost like, so, and I don't think it's right. I mean, there's some celebratory probably attitudes going on. Well, it serves him for, making fun of masks and all of that. He's still our president. And, more than that, he's a human being. Okay.
Exactly.
And so, I'm not happy about it. Do you think this might end up creating some sympathy for him? It's hard not to be sympathetic to someone who is ill.
Yeah, I actually don't think it will. I mean, a lot of my contemporaries actually think I'm wrong. They say, hey, this will help him where he needs help with suburban women. There is a soft, actually Republican vote for him, the suburban women. It's why Republicans lost the House it's part of the reason why the Republicans lost the House in 2018 is Trump kind of drags us down a little bit with suburban women. And so some of these Republican districts went Democrat, the Orange County districts, Georgia's 6th congressional district. So some of these districts, Trump doesn't even improve his numbers with suburban women. But I think the major benefit from this is that everyone's going to be talking about Trump, and he always benefits when he is the narrative, when it's a referendum on him. And so I don't think that there's going to be much room for policy alternatives or Joe Biden's ideas or anything else. Every day, everyone's going to be checking on what is the president doing? What is he saying? And he's going to have total command of the narrative, I think, over these next 2 weeks.
Okay. So before this happened, what's the name of your friend who referred you to me that I interviewed?
Ed Dowd.
Ed Dowd. Okay. So Ed was telling us then during his interview that your work showed President Trump in a very solid lead, and it looked like he was going to succeed in this election. Tell us how your work shows that and how it differs from the polls that showing Joe Biden with anywhere from a 5 to 7 point lead, depends on the polls. And obviously, we're all skeptical of the polls after 2016, right? So how does your work differ from standard polling, Ali?
So I'm trying to do a quick rundown is near impossible, but let me try and filibuster here is polling essentially is a little voodoo math. And it's a little bit of science, but what you have to try to predict is what is the turnout model? Who's excited to vote? Who's going to vote? And then you can start polling those target demographics. And what we believe is that, what the Republicans believe is that the pollsters got it wrong again. So they're showing that Joe Biden has a 10-point national lead. And then when you get into these swing states, it's 5 to 7 points. And when you calculate that out, a Republican can win if a Democrat is polling anywhere from 3 to 5 points. And so what you have to kind of reconcile in your head in the system of federalism and the Electoral College is that because someone is polling nationally ahead doesn't really mean much. They have to be polling by a margin that indicates that the swing states are breaking down one way. And then you've got segments of swing states. So, for example, where Trump did well is where Reagan did well. There's Reagan Democrats, the Rust Belt, the Midwest. So that's an entire demographic. And then part of it's more Catholic than the other, and part of it's not. And then you have states where there's a Latino play, Arizona and Florida, and that polls differently. So essentially what you have to do is you actually have to dive into the state polling, totally reject national polling, and you have to see where are these campaigns putting their resources, because while you and I have access to all this public polling where it's costing them, $10,000, $20,000, the campaigns are spending $50,000 to $100,000 to do internal polling, and internal polling has larger sample sizes. They do deep dives. They are tracking voters sometimes week to week in particular states, and so they know what they're doing. So part of my benefit of what I can share with not just my clients behind the scenes, but now I'm sharing with the public these past 4 years is, if you watch it's a little like Art of War. If you watch the Joe Biden campaign pull its resources out of Florida, or you watched a month and a half ago, there was uproar amongst his Latino staffers saying, hey, they're not putting enough resources in, and they weren't doubling the staff at the time that they should. It was kind of a concession in Florida with the Latino vote there. And so I was able to predict 4 weeks early that Joe Biden was having a Latino problem. And then that got confirmed a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. And now you've seen us transition from what I call the second map, which is they need to make Arizona competitive, which I don't think will happen for Joe Biden. And they've got to win Florida, which I don't think will happen for Joe Biden. And they've moved back to the original map. This is a map that both campaigns want to fight. And that's Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and maybe North Carolina. And so that's where we're fighting. So you're looking for tea leaves, you're watching state polling, and you're just seeing where the big guys moving their resources, because they're not moving them for no reason. These are $10 and $20 million moves when you make a move, and it's based off $100,000, $150,000 polling.
What do you make out of the narrative of voter suppression, starting off with the post office and trying to get rid of mail sorters and one mailbox, for every 50,000 people in Texas? And, do you think that, basically there are bigger numbers of Democrats, right? It's a numbers game. And do you think that we could be heading towards a situation where Biden could win the popular vote and lose the Electoral College? Is that kind of the setup that we could be looking at, like 2016?
We could, but I actually don't think that that's likely. I think that Trump, if he wins, will win the popular vote and the Electoral College. So I think that we have a greater chance of whoever the winner is. And just so everybody knows, there's one contest. The popular vote is a colloquial term by the media. There's no such thing as a popular vote. The media's invented this thing. We live in a republic where the signers to the compact, to the contract that we call the Constitution, were states, and so it wasn't like these aristocrats went and signed their name and said, well, my family and my family and my family, or a percentage of the population. No, people were elected by their states, and those states then formed a constitutional convention. And this was after the failure of the Articles of Confederation. So people really have to understand like this, I know that we live in a modern world and in the information age, and it's easy to say that some of these systems are archaic, but there's one system that elects the president, and that's the Electoral College. But I actually think that with this election, we're going to have the winner of the majority of all votes cast in the nation and the Electoral College will likely be the same person. And but I got to tell you, even before the debate, Biden has, I had Trump as a huge winner, but this is about even now because of some of the decisions coming out of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Ohio, and Michigan. The courts have totally changed the rules after early voting started. So Biden got a lifeline from some federal judges 2 weeks ago, and I think it's put this race at back even.
So you think this race is even right now?
Right now it is. And I mean, it was kind of shocking to me. I really didn't expect the courts to make the decisions that I think they're making. And, I'm a Republican, but I think that these decisions are dangerous, and I think that they're quantifiably dangerous. And so for example, for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to say that we're going to suspend state law. Okay, so the court has now made itself a policy body. We're going to suspend state law and declare that you can accept ballots after the election day. But then we're not going to suspend law for the poll watchers. So the poll watchers in Pennsylvania have to be from within the individual counties instead of the state, which is not a requirement in most states, by the way. It just reeks of partisan bias. It just reeks of partisan bias. And then while the courts are trying to protect their butts on this whole postmarking issue, which is, okay, if I mail in my ballot, it's an absentee ballot or it's a universal mail-in ballot, does the post office have to postmark it? And what does that postmark date have to be? And the courts are saying, oh, it has to be by election day. But if you read these opinions, it says, or no proof that it was sent afterwards. And, you know, if you're like me and you actually do still send mail, you'll notice that a lot of times your mail is never postmarked. And especially if it's sent within the same town. So this is, I got to tell you, I don't think that there's been a bigger threat to democracy or our republic than what Democrats are doing in gaslighting this mail-in voting system. Our post office is not equipped to handle this. We aren't equipped to monitor this. There's no way to challenge this. These are going to be decisions by random judges, and each of them can all make different decisions because states govern their own elections. So it's not like the Supreme Court can come up and say, you know, they're not constitutionally required to come out with a national standard on how states conduct their postmarking review. And so I think we're playing with fire, and we're seeing the vulnerability of federalism right now. But this is Gore v. Bush on crack. I mean, people have no idea what's coming for us after this election unless there's not a clear winner.
And no one has an idea. So
right.
We know it's going to be contested if it's close, right?
Yep.
I mean, we really needed a clear victory, and even a clear victory. Your guy said that if he was on the other side of that clear victory, that it couldn't be a valid election. First time in my life, Ali, that I've ever heard a president, an incumbent, say that he wasn't going to accept the election results if he lost, and that he wouldn't commit to a peaceful transition of power. Have you?
Well, I wouldn't agree that that's what he said. What he said is if we see examples of fraud, then he will not. So if it's like, what does it mean to have a clear winner? You know, is that the AP calling it? Is that MSNBC calling it? Is that Fox News calling it? And so what we've traditionally relied on in this country is projection. So since the advent of modern media, what you do is you rely on the media talking to secretaries of states. Secretaries of states will tell you which way it's going to be. And then the media calls the election, and then the presumably the loser concedes, which does trigger certain legal, it takes away certain legal remedies from you. And so conceding, when you concede, for example, no one can act as an agent on your behalf. So imagine you telling your broker, I don't want to invest in any FANG stock, and then they invest in it. They're acting, they can have the power of attorney, but if you're giving them clear instruction on things not to do, they're not allowed to do it. So that was a part of the significance, for example, of what created a secondary legal question when Al Gore conceded the race, and then his lawyers told him to unconcede. He created something that has never existed in America or English common law. And so Gore started this mess where some candidates unconcede, which does not have a legal precedent, and it's still kind of willy-nilly. But
is it even in the dictionary?
No, it's not. It's a little like when politicians say, I misspoke. What does that mean? You can only speak once. But go ahead. What I heard President Trump say was, again, if there were tens of thousands of examples of fraud, then he wasn't going to concede till they got down to the bottom of it. And I think that both candidates should keep their legal options open. I think that the American public should be certain. And if we're going to all of a sudden wait for elections to be certified, which we've never done in this country, then let's go ahead and wait for that. But if we're waiting for Joe Biden's endorsers, these newspaper endorsements, so if we're waiting for the media, which is on his side, to say Joe Biden won, Trump shouldn't concede. And so it's very bizarre what's going on, and everybody's guessing, oh, well, it's going to look like a red mirage, and then it's going to be Joe Biden who actually won. I think that I just think it's really reckless for the media to be talking this way. None of us have any idea how this is going to work out. And if it looks like that, you could accidentally trigger a civil war, and or maybe purposefully, if you ask some of these Antifa thugs out in the street.
Yeah, there's a lot of guns in America, aren't there? I mean, I could remember the 60s where we had a lot of turmoil in the streets, but I don't remember the people in the streets carrying around AKs, just walking around in a protest, and both sides, right? So they're both armed. Yep. And it wasn't like that in the 60s. I mean, it was mainly Molotov cocktails and breaking windows and setting fires. But, besides Kent State and a few other incidents, the public didn't walk around ready to, go into battle in the streets. It kind of looks like that to me. I'm concerned. Do you think that that is a possible outcome if we don't have a result? And how long do you think it's going to take to adjudicate this? Because don't you believe it's going to end up in the courts, Ali?
I just hope and I pray not, because that is a ticking time bomb. Our system, it's kind of strange because our system has scaled so well, across a couple hundred years, because you got to imagine a lot of countries, there's the president isn't in office for months, longer. And so what's really interesting about our system is we vote on the first Tuesday after the first Monday of November. We have the Electoral College, I think somewhere around December 10th or so. And then the House has to certify the election. The Senate recognizes the certification, and states don't even have to have their elections officially certified until at least just before inauguration. So there's this ebb and flow to things that lead up to January 20th, which is the inauguration. And so we really have to have this stuff figured out by December 10th. But honestly, I think anything longer than 2 days will put this country psychologically in a place that we're not prepared for. And the loudest voices will be in command of the system. And nobody knows what that means. And I do think that this country, I don't know how else to put it, but I do think that this country is ready to be at each other's throat, to put it politely.
Okay, how do you prepare for something like that besides getting on an airplane and looking for a haven?
It depends on your predisposition, whether you want to be here for it or not.
I'd rather watch it on TV.
Yeah, then I'd get the heck out of Dodge. Population density is going to matter. I think there's going to be, just saying this, if something like that did break out, heaven forbid, you would see white people on the left believe that, even let's just say dumb white people on the left who think they're down for a cause and down for a revolution would find themselves sometimes on the opposite side of violence, but with their own side. And likewise, on the right, you could find people who defer to authoritarian forces or badges and find themselves on the opposite side of the same side. So it's really interesting because we can't appreciate that our country is a non-homogeneous, there's a lot of races, a lot of religions, And then the population density, the cities will operate very different than the suburbs, which will operate different than the rural places. So if it was me, I would not be caught dead in a major city election night, and I just wouldn't, or the next day. And especially where you've seen any of these arsons or riots break out. And what I like to tell people is people protest in the day. The people at night are not the people who protested in the day. These are two separate groups of people. And there are people who hate both the left and the right and want to see this country descend into chaos. And then what happens is a youth element gets involved that's just kind of ignorant of it, but ready to play with fire. And so if it was me on election night, whichever party, I wouldn't be in Chicago. I wouldn't be in New York. I wouldn't be in LA, because people are going to look for excuses to commit violence and to get away with other things, regardless of the outcome or not outcome. And that's going to happen. So that's pretty much set in stone. So I would just suggest that people, order the food that they need, for a couple of weeks, stock up on water. I mean, I don't want to sound like a prepper, but if you can be home, if you work from home, it's a good couple of weeks to stay home and assess whether you need to travel outside the country or not. Because if we get to December 10th and both parties have decided to opt out of the political system, and they're then trying to abuse the political system, it will turn into political assassinations in no time. People have no idea. But what you're talking about in the 60s is people have to remember there were a few political assassinations, but there weren't just arsons, Dale. There were bombers. And I'm not just talking about Bill Ayers. There were a ton of them. I mean, and some of these people are college professors now. And so this generation is going to do way, 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 way worse. I mean, this is how I historically put it into context. You're looking at the Civil War, and this is the idea that neighbor is willing to kill neighbor. You're looking at the 60s, which is people who know that you can do ever increasing radicalizing moves to gain more people for your side, and that you don't need a majority, you only need force. And you're looking at a 1920s type of Bolsheviks style revolution where people have a political agenda that is kind of organized in it's kind of like organized crime. And some of this involves funny money, and some of it's ideological, and some of it's both. And you have all three of those elements swirling right now. So we need a miracle, or we're going to dive into human nature without a doubt. So I'm praying for a miracle.
I'm with you, buddy. I'm with you.
It.
So, definitely nerve-wracking on top of a pandemic, on top of an economy that took a body blow. And I'm hoping that people can see that we're really all brothers and sisters, and that, this is going to be a crisis, but the definition of crisis is danger and opportunity. And I hope that our country doesn't miss the opportunity during this crisis to heal, to mend, and reunite. In some manner, it's going to take time to heal, but you know what? I'm still going to stay bullish America for now, that we will persevere no matter what happens, that we'll come together. Otherwise, our next interview, I'll be speaking to you from the Grand Caymans.
Well, that sounds
and
good.
And really, it was really disturbing, but very interesting talk that we had today, Ali. I appreciate you coming here. And you know what? You and I just had a civil conversation, and we have different ideologies, and I can respect what you say and what you're thinking. And there wasn't one name called between you and I. And why can't that happen again? That's my hope.
Can. If we decentralize media, if we have groups like yours and find communities of like-minded people, I think we'll get along. I actually think that centralization has created this headbutting. I think most of it's a mirage. I think people want to get along, and people want to debate the issues around money and the issues around policy. And we've just kind of been told that we hate each other. I'm not convinced that Americans do hate each other, but I am convinced that we can be psyoped into a war. And I'm going to do everything I can to avoid that. Thanks for having me, Dale.
Oh, it's great. Well, maybe in 2024 we could prove it by you and I being on the same ticket.
I'm going to be supporting Kanye West. But seriously.
Ali Alexander, everybody, and you could follow him at Ali and keep in touch with him. It's a pleasure meeting you. You know, normally I tell people that have an interview with me that they're now my trading warrior brother. I'm just going to say, Ali, you're my brother.
I appreciate it, Dale. And you're my brother. God
All
bless
right,
everybody.
buddy. All right,
Bye.
everyone. That's going to be a wrap for the week, everyone. Enjoy your weekend. Remember, don't just count your pips or your votes or your ballots, count your blessings. And let's keep our heads about us and lead from the heart. I'll see everyone on Monday. Adios.